How come the nuns were never secret hookers when we were in school?
Say a prayer for Sister Sugar Walls.
The 4:30 Movie, the new movie written and directed by Kevin Smith. It's a semi-autobiographical coming-of-age comedy. I had the opportunity just a few nights ago to see this movie, and I was actually pretty pleasantly surprised. This movie is a love letter to movies and movie theaters in the 80s, and we're going to get into everything I liked and I didn't like about this movie. Welcome back to the Ecto-Violence channel. My name is Alec. Today we're talking Kevin Smith's brand new movie, The 4:30 Movie. Little background to this, I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan. I started watching Clerks and Mallrats and stuff like that in my teenage years. My brother showed me those movies. These days, Kevin Smith gets a lot of internet hate because he tends to be emotional about movies and TV shows, which I don't see what's wrong with that, to be perfectly honest. He's a perfectly reasonable person. He's a nice guy. I like Kevin Smith. I absorb a lot of his content, his podcasts. A few years ago, Kevin Smith bought the movie theater that he went to as a kid. One of his ideas was, oh man, now that I have a movie theater, I should definitely film a movie there. And this is where we get The 4:30 Movie. Now the main cast, Austin Zager, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Say hello to Yoshi, everyone, he's back. He plays Brian David, which is essentially a sort of Kevin Smith type character. A very young Kevin Smith though, a high school Kevin Smith. If you know a lot about Kevin Smith, and if you listen to his podcast throughout the years, this will be a little bit more enjoyable because you'll notice things like this character carries around a tape recorder. That's something Kevin Smith did. There's also plenty of cameos from all the people you love to see from Kevin Smith movies. Jason Lee, Diedrich Bader, Brian O'Halloran, Jeff Anderson, Jason Mewes, Jason Biggs. What's interesting is this movie was actually approved by the Writers Guild of America to shoot during the writer's strike in 2023. So far on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 73%, which isn't terrible. And if you've been a fan of Kevin Smith for the last few years, a lot of people have mixed opinions on his movies, right? Jay and Silent Bob Reboot and Clerks 3 in particular, even Yoga Hosers, right? These were definitely not the best movies Kevin Smith has put out. So let's go ahead and talk about the positives of the 4:30 Movie. I feel like this movie is definitely a return to form for Kevin Smith. This movie is a spiritual sequel to Mallrats. Now it has no characters in common with Mallrats. It's not set in the View Askew universe. Jay and Silent Bob are not in this movie. But this movie is very much the start of a day for a kid, younger than the Mallrats crew, obviously a little bit. But he's a junior in high school and he's calling this girl to ask her out that he used to hang out with the previous summer. And he plans to spend all day at the movie theaters movie hopping until his date with her, essentially. Pretty simple plot. I'm not spoiling anything there. In fact, I don't even know how you would go about spoiling a movie like this. There is probably not much that would ruin the movie for you because it's pretty plain, pretty simple plot. Other than that, there's just a bunch of shenanigans and hijinks at the movie theater throughout the day. Very much like Mallrats at the mall. Now, besides Austin, you do have his two buddies. And honestly, I could see these guys appearing in more stuff in the future because they did a great job in this movie. I think Kevin Smith not only has a natural inkling for dialogue, but also casting people to represent his dialogue very well. The humor isn't quite as dark as some of the stuff that you'd see in like Clerks. It's a little bit more of a fun time like you'd see in Mallrats again, like I mentioned before. I think that's my biggest comparison. If you like a movie like Mallrats, you'll probably like this a little bit more than these last couple Kevin Smith movies. So I did notice the music. Okay, there's a couple needle drops that are really cool and interesting, right? But besides that, there is a score done by Bear McCreary, and it's actually awesome. There are saxophones and drum machines out the wazoo. And that's what I liked that a lot about this movie. You know, the 80s thing has been going on for a while now. For 10 or 15 years, people have been obsessed with 80s music. Drum machines, synthesizers, and I like that this took a little bit of a different approach. There are saxophones in there. And occasionally, you dig deep enough, you'll find some saxophones in modern 80s retro style music or whatever, but this movie did it differently, and it was awesome. Let me just say that. There's no stress, there's no tension while watching this movie, just a good time, you know what I mean? And I think that's something to be said because those last couple Kevin Smith movies definitely had that going where you're having some existential crisis while you're watching these movies. You are not doing that during this. Some notable comedy bits that stick out to me, the trailers that they watch in the movies. Fake trailers for comedic style movies and takes on what people have previously done. It's always going to make me laugh, at least a little bit. Dental School being referenced and being one of the movies that they're trying to go see that day. Absolutely hilarious. If you don't remember, that's the movie that a woman is trying to rent in the first Clerks movie. The movie's a short 88 minutes too, so you get in and out in this movie. The humor is pretty excellent, but it definitely feels like a movie that was made in like 2009. Ken Jeong as Manager Mike is very 2009. That's what I mean mostly by that. There's a scene where two characters are having sex, and at first when the scene starts, you don't realize that one of them is having sex because the other one's off screen. I thought that was absolutely hilarious. They did a good job with trying to portray this as the 80s. I did notice several things like Return of the Jedi Star Wars glasses in the kitchen in the beginning of the movie. So the attention to detail was definitely there with stuff like that. But this was also a much smaller budget of a movie, and it all takes place at this movie theater, basically. Honestly, I just think it was a return to form for Kevin Smith. Other than it being not in the View Askew universe, which, let's be honest, it's fine, it doesn't matter. We don't need to see Jay and Silent Bob pop up in this movie. Although the Jason Mewes cameo is pretty good, too. Now let's briefly talk about some of the negatives of the 4:30 movie. It definitely feels like a Kevin Smith movie, but there is some sort of weird element that takes it out of that, kind of like Zack and Miri, where you can believe this is a Kevin Smith movie, but if someone else directed it, you'd probably understand that too, like it would make sense. If this movie wasn't so autobiographical, and I didn't know so much about Kevin Smith. So the emo usher, that was an interesting character. He's even credited as that. Too bad emo wasn't a thing in 1986. Maybe I wasn't alive in 1986, so I don't know if people were doing that hair flip thing in the 80s, but that seems like a very 2006 to 2012 thing. But the character was funny, so, whatever. It's not that big of a deal, I'm just nitpicking. I mentioned before in the positive section that it was very short, 88 minutes, and there comes a time near the end of the movie where I'm like, oh, that's the end of the movie. But it worked very well with the way the characters were describing it. They were saying, this could be a movie one day, and if it was, this would be where I would end the movie. Fucking roll credits, you know what I mean? We expected that. And there's a whole gag, and I realize I'm talking about this in the negative section, but it is not a negative. But they're mentioning post-credit scenes early on in this movie, and they're talking about seeing one previously. And so because of that, your mind is like, should I stay? I should stay all the way through for this movie. I don't know what it is, but there's going to be something entertaining. And sure enough, it's just bloopers and bits from cut scenes and stuff, and I had a fun time with that. It wasn't trying to do anything crazy with a post-credit scene. It was just trying to show you a little bit more. Hey, thanks for sticking around. Before I rate this movie, why don't you go ahead and jump in the comments down below. Let me know if you've seen this movie yet, and if you did you like it? If you haven't, are you excited to see it? Personally, I would give this movie a 3.5 out of 5 hearts. I definitely had a good time with it. It hit me in the right spot because I used to do this. Go to a movie theater and hang out there all day, just movie hopping back and forth. Of course, I was a little younger than the characters in these movies, but it's a very distinguishable memory in my head. I think some people are going to see this and take it too seriously and just not have a good time with it because they haven't had a good time with Kevin Smith movies in a while, and I think some people are just over that kind of stuff. With that being said, if you have the means, I highly recommend going and checking this movie out in a theater. It is an experience. What's really cool is I actually got to see it in the theater that I grew up going to movies to. I grew up sneaking into this movie theater and movie hopping. Seeing R-rated movies when I was 11 years old, you know what I'm saying? So I had a great time and a great experience watching this at that theater. So if you're a movie fan, you're a Kevin Smith fan, I highly recommend going and checking this movie out. You will probably have a great time with it. And if you like this video, be sure to check out this one and hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.